Now joining me on the Peerless Boilers hotline is the broadcaster for the New Jersey Nets on the YES Network, as well as the NFL on CBS. That is the great Iron Eagle. Birdie Zach Gelb here at Shovio.com. Thank you for joining me, and how are you on this fine evening?
Yeah, I think there's a very good chance that you can add another role to my resume because of the NBA lockout. Co-host of this show with Zach Gelb.
That would be very nice. I would tell you this, because Bob Gelb's going in for a knee surgery. He's getting a knee replacement again, and I actually do need a replacement. So if we could do that, that would be great.
Would it be a producer/co-host, or would you just have me in the producer role?
See, now you just put me in a difficult spot because because listen here, because if you come on the show, which you will, and you'll kill it, then I have to fire my father because this is not a high-budget operation kind of show. So now I'm in a predicament right here. This is how we're going to resolve it. Thanks for the offer, Ian, but how about you go overseas and broadcast with the NBA players?
That's true. I do have an offer right now on the table from Croatia. I didn't want to mention that, but now that you've delved into the topic, I'm pondering it, and it's an exciting offer, and it will get me out of your crosshairs, and your family can continue to live in harmony on the air. So yeah, that's a possibility as well, Zach.
What about playing overseas? Do you think it's a good idea if this lockout continues and we miss more than the first 2 weeks of the season for the players to go and play overseas? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the issue right now, unfortunately, is this is real. There was a time where I think a lot of people just felt, no, it'll come to fruition. They'll work on the deal. They'll get it done. They'll start the season. Maybe they miss a week or two, but ultimately they'll get it done. The reality is, if you look at the calendar, whenever they finally do come to an agreement, if they come to an agreement, you have to then carve out a month for training camps, preseason, and a free agent period and trading period in order for these teams to go out and improve themselves and get ready for a regular season. So that's 1 month from the date in which they come to an agreement. And now you're feeling or starting to feel the effects of the periphery personnel getting affected by this lockout. Not just players, not just owners, and this is not what fans would think of, but people that work in the arenas, people that work for teams, people that work on the game day crew, vendors, parking attendants. These are the people that will be affected. This is the collateral damage, and this is the unfortunate part of the work stoppage.
Now, just like we saw with the NFL lockout, there's a lot of owners that have an urgency to get the players back on the field, in this case on the court, and then there's some owners that are kind of lackadaisical. Let's talk about Mikhail Prokhorov, the Boston Celtics owner, and the Orlando Magic owner. They have a lot of star players that this is their walk year in their contract. If they miss this season, they won't get the productivity from a Darren Williams if he chooses to go elsewhere. Do you think Mikhail Prokhorov is more eager to get this season going so he get another year out of Darren Williams?
I think he's eager to get this season going because of the experience of being an owner in the NBA. This is still new to him. He's still learning how to go about his business and what the terrain is in front of him. So while you're right, the Darren Williams angle is an important one, I think the bigger picture for Mikhail Prokhorov is this is another year to learn his craft, to get an understanding of how to run an NBA franchise and what it means to be an owner in the top basketball league in the world. With that said, he's not at financial risk. This is not going to affect his bottom line in his day-to-day world. There are some other owners around the NBA where it does, and those are the ones that I think are pushing for a better set of circumstances and a better format in which to pay the players. The difference between the NBA lockout and what was the NFL lockout is they weren't trying to change the entire system in the NFL. They knew they had a lot of money to separate and to break up, and it was just a matter of figuring out where the commas would go. In the NBA, there's a faction of owners right now that want to change the system. They want to make it more like the NFL. And I think the players and the Players Association will be very hesitant to allow that to happen, and that's why this could go on for a while.
Do you think we'll miss the entire season?
I would tell you that there's a chance of that happening more so than anyone could have imagined when the season ended with the Dallas Mavericks winning the NBA championship back in June. At that point, I think most people felt that was not realistic, that there was just too much going for the NBA. There was too much momentum. The TV ratings were up. Storylines were excellent. They had finally kind of gotten back their core audience and added to it over the last few years. Now, I can tell you that this is not just a a matter of figuring out what piece of the pie goes to who. There are some more serious issues at heart here, and the assumption was that the two sides had already come together on some of those issues, and the reality is they're not even close.
We're talking to the great Ian Eagle. Ian joins us on the Peerless Boilers hotline. Peerless builds America's best boilers. And as we mentioned, Ian was on the call last week for the emotional Houston Texans and the Oakland Raiders game. Paint the picture for me out there in Houston, especially when the Oakland Raiders had a dramatic win after losing their owner, Al Davis.
Yeah, I'll take you back to Saturday morning as we were getting ready to drive out to the Oakland Raiders hotel to meet with them. We got the news regarding Al Davis passing away, longtime owner of the Oakland Raiders at the age of 82. We were very curious to see how the team would handle it, and I've got to tell you that I thought Hugh Jackson, the head coach of the team, struck the right chord, handled it incredibly well, both on the field and off the field, making sure his players were focused and concentrated, and also articulating how much this game would mean to Mr. Davis and mean to the franchise. On Sunday, it was a slow start for the Raiders. The Texans took advantage early. They looked very sharp early, in fact, and then the Raiders began to turn the tide, and the defense clamped down offensively. They started finding some cracks in that Houston defense. Mario Williams goes down with a pectoral injury. He's going to miss the season now. We didn't realize the extent of the injury when he went out. And I really felt that Hugh Jackson just hit all the right buttons with this team. Campbell played well. The kicking game was spectacular with Sebastian Janikowski. McFadden was able to gain some steam in the second half, and you could feel the tension building. You could feel what was at stake for this franchise. We got a great shot of Al Davis's son, who most people were not that familiar with, Mark Davis, who was in the background when it was the Raiders. It was all about Al Davis. You didn't know anything about the franchise. You didn't need to know unless Al Davis felt you needed to know it. And nobody outside of the Oakland area was very familiar with his son, Mark Davis. Well, he was there. We got great shots of him in the pregame show, and then in the waning moments of the game, a great camera shot of Hugh Jackson going down to one knee, the head coach, and then a reaction shot of Al's son in the owner's box after they pulled out the win on the very last play of the game. So I'm not sure that they could have drew it up any better, and it was the perfect script for a weekend that was very emotional and very moving for the organization.
I was talking about Al Davis in the opening of the show, and I made the point that the only two colors he cared about was silver and black. He didn't care what your nationality was. He didn't care what your ethnicity was. All he cared about if you gave the football team the best chance to win, and that was evident through Tom Flores, Jim Plunkett, and Art Shell. If there was one thing that you would want people to remember about Al Davis, what would it be?
Well, I can tell you from a personal standpoint, he was a Syracuse guy. In my second year working the NFL on CBS, 1999, I was doing a game in Buffalo, Oakland at Buffalo, either my second year or third year. And somebody came into the booth, the broadcast booth. I didn't know the person. And they said, excuse me, Ian, somebody wants to meet you. And I said, yeah, great. And bring them in. They said, no, you have to go to them. I said, well, who is this exactly that I'm going to go meet? They said, well, you'll want to meet him. I said, okay, that piqued my curiosity. I walk out of the booth. This guy leads me down the hallway. He could have led me down to an alleyway to kick my, what. I don't know what the guy was doing. And he leads me down the hallway, leads me into a second room, and there is Mr. Davis sitting there. And I walk in the room. I said, oh, Mr. Davis, great to meet you. He says, you went to Syracuse, didn't you, Ian? I said, yeah, class of 1990. He goes, yeah. He goes, I like you. I like your work. I said, oh, that means a lot to me. Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. He said, you like the Raiders? I said, yeah. I'm obviously a historian of the game and grew up in the 70s into the 80s and respect the greatness of the organization. Absolutely, I like the Raiders. And he looks at me, he says, well, the Raiders like you then.
Because
and that was it. That got dismissed. I shook his hand. He said, all right. And that was it. I knew that was the end of it. I ended up meeting him probably 2 or 3 more times over the years, and he was always very friendly, and obviously we had the Syracuse connection. I just think this guy was ahead of his time. He saw things in terms of scouting and player development that others did not see, going back to the 60s and 70s. And unfortunately, the The younger fans probably have no idea of this because all they've seen is the Raiders' struggle since 2002. He was absolutely a visionary and really a big part of why the game is what it is today has to do with Al Davis and the way that he approached things.
Yeah, I was talking about how much of a vital asset he was to making the NFL what it is today, and it was just interesting because I'm 17. Obviously, I understand the importance that this man had to the NFL, but then there was people that are younger in the chat room listening. They're saying, Zach, what are you talking about? Look at what he drafted with Jamarcus Russell and Darius Hayward-Bay. So it's kind of unfortunate that my generation will not be able to appreciate when Al Davis was winning 3 Super Bowls because of his recent failure, really, with the Oakland Raiders.
Yeah, I do think because he had so much success through the years, he was hesitant to really release any of that power within the organization. There was nobody else. It was all him. He was the main decision maker. Yeah, he had scouts, he had personnel people underneath him, but it was all him. And probably somewhere along the line, he should have groomed somebody to take over and make that transition. And that probably is a big reason why his persona at the end was not as strong as it should be. But you're right. If the younger football fans want to do a little bit of research, they'll understand that this guy, he knew what he was doing. He knew how to run a team. He knew how to get the edge. He knew how to find an advantage. And he lived, breathed football all the time. That was his life. That team was his life, and he made it his life's work.
We're talking to Ian Eagle, and Ian does the preseason games for the Jets on CBS. And let's talk about that Jets team. There's a lot of turmoil in that locker room, allegedly. Derek Mason was shipped to the Houston Texans. What's the relationship right now with the Jets wide receiver and their quarterback and their offensive coordinator?
Yeah, I think there is some legitimate chaos behind the scenes right now with the Jets. And this is what happens when you set yourselves up with such not only lofty goals, because it's one thing to privately talk about winning a Super Bowl, it's another to publicly go out and try to shove it in other teams' faces. There's a target on your back. The last 2 years, the Jets were able to handle that. They handled that pressure. This year, I think it is getting the best of them just a bit. Now, does it mean the season's over? Of course not. There's a lot of football to be played. This is still a very talented group. But I didn't walk out of the preseason thinking that this team was clearly the best team in the AFC. I thought that there were going to be bumps along the way, and Sanchez is still developing. That offensive line is certainly not of championship caliber. Defensively, there are holes in that defense that they're going to have to address during this coming off season as well. I know they felt like they improved their pass rushing. It's not to the point yet where Rex can rely on it. He still has to come up with some exotic blitz packages and some creative things that other great defenses don't have to do. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to turn out. If you ask me today, right now, this moment, is this a playoff team? I would tell you no. Obviously, a lot can happen. You got to play through the schedule. But as of this moment, I look around the AFC, I think there are teams that are better than them.
I want you to break down 2 games for us this week. One you'll be on the call for. That's Pittsburgh and Jacksonville. We'll get to the other in just a second.
Pittsburgh, Jacksonville. Pittsburgh is gaining some steam. They've dealt with injuries. They've handled those injuries. They've been very good at home. Jacksonville is reeling. They are searching right now and hoping that Blaine Gabbert can quickly catch on. He looked better last week in a loss to Cincinnati, but certainly going against an experienced Pittsburgh defense, there's a chance this one could be very lopsided, and the Steelers know that their margin of error is much slimmer than it has been in the past. Baltimore is the real deal, and I think Pittsburgh probably wins this thing in a blowout.
You would think this would be a trap game, but the Giants thought they had a trap game last week against the Seattle Seahawks. We all know the deal. Tavares Jackson went down. Charlie Whitehurst came in, and the Seattle Seahawks beat the Giants in the new Meadowlands Stadium. The Giants have a tough task this week facing the Buffalo Bills. Break down this game for me.
Yeah, I can't figure out the Giants. Really can't get a handle on their team. There are moments where they look like they're competitive and they can go out and win their division. There are other moments where the rudimentary part of the game fails them. And Buffalo, that's a team that's gained a lot of confidence. Ryan Fitzpatrick, he reminds me a lot of my former partner, Rich Gannon. It's just clicked for him. It's his 3rd NFL team It's all happening. It's all slowed down. They believe in him. I just think Buffalo right now is playing with a lot of confidence, and I think the Giants' timing is not very good to get better against the Buffalo Bills. I think there's a big challenge this week for Tom Coughlin's squad.
Vince Young put the Eagles as the dream team. He labeled them that in the preseason. So much for a third-string quarterback naming someone a dream team. But the Eagles have been dreadful so far. They're 1-4. Is Andy Reid on the hot seat right now?
He's on the hot seat. He's built up a lot of equity because of the success that he's had there, but he took some big chances this year during the offseason. The defensive coordinator position was one that was questioned the second he made that choice, and obviously those questions have come to life because their defense has been brutal. Offensively, you know what Michael Vick can do for you. There are times where he will throw you and run you out of games as well. That's what happened in Atlanta. If you remember going back, they were not thrilled with him even before the dogfighting incident that cost him his NFL career at the time. That was not headed in the right direction. There were questions and issues in Atlanta as to whether or not Michael Vick could be an effective 16-game leader for an offense, making good decisions, making the right decisions, and I think those same questions are coming to the surface again now with Philadelphia. That's a little bit out of control. I don't know if Andy can reel this one back in. The dream team has absolutely turned out to be a nightmare.
I think the Eagles are going to turn it around. I don't know if they're necessarily going to make the playoffs, but let's just throw an interesting question out there. Let's say if the Eagles finished last in the NFL, do you think they would draft Andrew Luck?
Yes, I think they would. You know, remember, Andy Reid's a guy that promised the job to Kevin Kolb, and 2 weeks in, it became Michael Vick's job. Things change in a hurry in the NFL. If you have a chance to get a bona fide stud quarterback, you can set your team up for 10 years. Just look at the Indianapolis Colts and the way things have transpired for that franchise with the injury to Peyton Manning. That position means so much in a pass-happy league. I think they could get some takers for Michael Vick. I would take Andrew Luck in a heartbeat.
Ian, thanks so much. You were great tonight.
All right, Z-Man. Keep the seat warm, my friend. Keep it warm.
Will do, Ian. All the best.